My name's Sam, short for Samuel, and I was born in Italy. My parents moved to the UK in the late 60s, where they started a family-run Italian restaurant that didn't just take care of us, but also helped out a bunch of extended family, including cousins I barely saw. Even though we're not always in each other's business, we're tight. We make an effort to show up for family events, partly to dodge the disapproving stare of my grandma, the real boss of the family. 7 years ago, I married Connie. She'd always been the type to expect things done her way, and somehow that turned into a marriage. We were both around 30 and had been in this kind of going-nowhere relationship for a while. It wasn't bad, just aimless. We had fun, went to parties, enjoyed each other's company, but it didn't have that glue that holds people together forever. Still, we decided to tie the knot. Unfortunately, my grandmother never really warmed up to Connie. She tolerated her, sure, never outright rude, but you could see it in her eyes. That kind of subtle disbelief, like she was just waiting for Connie to mess up. And where women get that sort of sixth sense, I'll never know. Even when she kept her thoughts to herself, my wife could feel it. Right before the wedding, my grandmother pulled me aside and said something that stuck with me. "Keep an eye on Connie. There's something off." I didn't know what to make of it at the time, but her words lingered in the back of my mind for years. Then, about a month ago, I found out Connie had been secretly seeing another man. They'd been meeting up regularly for at least 6 months. I didn't just stumble onto this, I had to dig. But honestly, once I started looking, it wasn't even that hard to uncover. It all started with something small, a dumb little pen. Just your typical hotel giveaway pen, cheap and plastic. But the logo on it caught my eye. I couldn't remember ever staying at the hotel printed on the side. I usually stick to the big name chains when I travel, mostly for the loyalty points, not that they're all that generous. One night, Connie and I were out walking, and I needed a pen. She dug through her oversized purse and handed me one. After I jotted down what I needed, I turned it over and saw the hotel name. It didn't register at first, but later, it really started to bother me. I knew I'd never been to that hotel. I didn't say anything right then. Just handed it back to her, and tucked that odd little moment away in my head. That night, we were meeting up with some friends for dinner, drinks, and a bit of dancing, nothing serious. Just a fun evening. We ended up at the lounge bar of one of our favorite spots. It had this warm, familiar vibe that always made us feel at ease. Plus, my cousin owned the place, which meant we got a generous family discount. We made a point to support the place as often as we could. It was kind of a win-win. We helped boost his business, and he helped keep our social life affordable. That night, we were with 2 other couples, Carlo and his wife, Joanna, and Phil and Terry. Carlo and Joanna were a few years older than us, maybe 5, but we still considered them family, even if the connection was distant. Carlo had that old-school charm, and his life had been, well, colorful, let's say. Not everything he did was exactly legal, but he had a good heart underneath it all. Just don't get on his bad side. Carlo always felt like an older brother to me. He had my back, no matter what. If I was headed for trouble, he'd steer me clear. His wife Joanna was lovely, elegant, sharp, and the only person who could really keep Carlo in check. He adored her, completely and unapologetically. And somehow, she had this quiet power over him that even his rough edges couldn't ignore. I met Phil through work, and we hit it off right away. We were the same age and shared a pretty similar outlook on life. We even played golf together sometimes, and before long, our friendship extended well beyond the course. His wife, Terry, would often join our chats at the club, and on the surface, everything seemed just fine. It didn't take long for Connie and Terry to click. They'd go on these endless shopping sprees together. Seriously, they'd buy everything in sight and spend half a day doing it. Connie would come home with bags upon bags like she'd emptied out an entire mall. Phil always stayed his warm, friendly self, but Terry, she was different. Lately, she'd been kind of distant, like her mind was somewhere else. I had a feeling something was off and mentioned it to Connie more than once. But she'd just wave it off with the usual, "It's a women's thing." like that explained anything. That evening, we were sitting in a cozy corner of the bar, sipping cocktails, when Carlo and Joanna showed up. I stood to greet them with hugs and kisses, and a sharp waiter immediately brought fresh drinks for everyone. Connie always commented on how we seemed to get VIP treatment wherever we went. Perks of being regulars, I guess. Plus, with my cousin owning the place, we always had a reserved table in the perfect spot, private, but with a view of the entrance. Carlo insisted on that view every time, though he never said why, and none of us pressed him. Joanna asked about Phil and Terry, saying she'd already spoken to Connie earlier and heard they might be a little late. Apparently, Phil hadn't made it home yet. Carlo caught my eye at that moment. He gave me one of those looks that said, "Not now," and shook his head subtly. I tucked the moment away in my mind. I needed to talk to him later. Not long after, Phil and Terry finally walked in. They looked a bit flustered, like they'd been rushing. Carlo gave them a long look, unreadable. I saw that expression again, that knowing look, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was onto something I wasn't. We all settled in and talked about work, future plans, and the usual family updates over dinner. Then we moved back to the lounge area, where music was playing and the atmosphere had picked up. The women were excited to dance, so the three of us guys hung back for a bit, but eventually, we knew the drill, we had to join them. Carlo was the first to step up, bringing Joanna back to the table after the first song. When I glanced at Phil and Terry, they were still out there on the dance floor, but something felt off. Their body language didn't match the beat, if you know what I mean. I leaned in and quietly asked Connie if everything was okay between them. She said, "I think so," but didn't sound too sure. Said Terry hadn't mentioned anything. I took another look, and yeah, something was wrong. When Phil and Terry came back to the table, she barely sat down before excusing herself to use the restroom. Carlo asked Phil, real casual, "Everything good?" Phil just nodded and said, "Yeah, maybe had a bit too much," and motioned for another round. The waiter brought more drinks, and while we waited for the women to return, the unspoken tension hung thick in the air. Connie's expression changed, anxious, distracted, and Carlo nudged me under the table, subtle but deliberate. Then he gave me a wink, the kind that says I know something you don't. We tried to shake off the heaviness by switching dance partners for a bit. It helped, temporarily. But just as we were about to call it a night, I noticed Connie talking to Phil across the room. Alone. Away from everyone else. It struck me as odd. I thought about asking her about it, but ended up keeping it to myself. We all left in separate cabs. The next day, I couldn't hold my curiosity back anymore. "What was going on with Phil and Terry last night?" I asked her outright. She told me everything was fine, but the way she stared out the window while answering, I wasn't buying it. Something felt wrong. I couldn't say what it was exactly, but it gnawed at me. That night, Connie tried to be especially affectionate, whispering sweet things and reminding me how much she loved me. I clung to that moment, telling her I loved her too, told her she was my wife, and no one would ever come between us. I hugged her like I never wanted to let go, kissed her cheeks, her forehead, and then we fell asleep. But I couldn't shake the strange vibe from the night before. It haunted me, stirring in my chest like a splinter I couldn't dig out. I knew I had to talk to Carlo. First thing in the morning, Connie left for the gym early, and I wandered around the house in a daze. I poured myself a tall glass of cold orange juice and sat at my laptop, trying to clear my head. That's when I remembered the pen. I pulled up Google and typed in the hotel name printed on its side, the one from Connie's purse. It wasn't far. Just on the other side of London. I jotted down the contact info and dove into the hotel's background, hoping to find a clue. Anything. But nothing jumped out. The mystery stayed intact. I was ready to do something. Anything. I called Carlo, my voice heavy with tension. "Hey, what's going on with Phil and Terry?" I asked. Should I be worried? The concern must have bled through the phone, because Carlo didn't hesitate. He told me to meet him at his brother's bar at noon. Alone. I said I'd be there, hung up, and sat there with a growing pit in my stomach. Later that morning, I let Connie know I had to step out, told her I'd be back soon. She looked at me, her eyes full of quiet worry. "What's he want to talk about?" she asked. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Nothing big," I said, but I could feel a knot tightening in my chest. The drive over was filled with dread. Carlo met me at the back entrance of the bar. He didn't say a word, just nodded and gestured for me to follow. We weaved through storage rooms and finally stepped into a private space tucked away behind the bar. It looked like a converted office, dimly lit with a huge oak table in the center. We sat on opposite sides. His face was serious, more than that, solemn. "I made a promise to your dad," he said, voice low, "to look out for you. And I've always meant it. But what I'm about to tell you, it's going to hurt." His eyes looked pained, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe right. Carlos slid a large manila envelope across the table. "Whatever's in here," he said, "I need you to remember I'm with you. I've got your back. No matter what." His hands moved slowly, like even touching the envelope was a burden. I opened it. Photos spilled out, glossy, color crisp, each one hitting like a punch to the chest. Connie. With another man. Same cheap hotel room in every shot. Some were close-ups, others taken from a distance, but all of them showed a connection that couldn't be mistaken for innocent. She was smiling in one. Lying on a bed in another. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't stop staring. "How long?" I croaked. "Who the hell is he?" Carlo looked away for a second, like it physically hurt him to speak. "I started hearing whispers a few weeks ago," he said. "Nothing solid. Just little things, places she was seen, people she talked to. But right before our dinner last week, I finally got something concrete." He said he'd spotted Connie in a restaurant down in South London, with a guy who seemed way too familiar with her. It wasn't just how they sat or talked, it was the way they looked at each other. That's when he connected the dots. The man was Tony Drew, Phil's brother. He reminded me of the strange looks exchanged that night, between Connie, Phil, and Terry, and suddenly it all started making sense. I asked Carlo if the hotel from the pen, the one in her purse, was where it happened. He nodded. That was it. I told him I had someone quietly tracking Connie and her movements since early last week. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to sit on my hands waiting. "I want to confront this guy," I said, fire rising in my chest. But Carlo put a hand up. "Don't," he said. "Not like this. If you lose your temper, it could spiral fast. I know you, Sam. Think this through. Handle it smart." I didn't want to hear it. "I need to know where he lives, where he works, everything," I said. "I'll handle it. Just give me the details." Carlo nodded. "It's all in there," he said, pointing at the envelope. "But listen, we've got to be smart about this. You don't want to end up in court or worse. You want to get out of this with your life intact, yeah? That means thinking 2 steps ahead." He laid out a plan, strategic, careful. No rash moves, just quiet precision. He needed me to agree before moving forward. As we spoke, Carlo explained the guy, Tony, was single now, divorced a while ago. No kids. Seemed to have a thing for married women. Probably doesn't want a real relationship, he muttered. Just drama-free attention. Then he looked me in the eye. "What about Phil?" he asked. "You two are close, but the way he acted at dinner, I've got doubts. I've been watching him. Think he might know what's going on. Question is, can you still call him a friend?" I shook my head. "I noticed it too. And honestly? No. Not anymore. I think Terry's involved in this somehow too. The way she acted, it's like she's in on it. I think we need to cut ties with both of them," I added. "All of them." Carlo nodded slowly. "If this was just a one-off mistake, maybe I could try to forget it," I said. "But it's not. Not with those photos. I can't unsee them. And I won't forgive this. He didn't argue. Instead, he leaned in and said, Then your next step is protecting yourself. No fast moves. No emotional outbursts. We plan. We act. When it's time. I told Carlo I understood. But deep down, I was already thinking about how this would end. And it wasn't going to be pretty. I needed time to think everything through, to plan carefully. But one thing I was sure of, I wanted both Phil and Connie to pay for what they'd done. Carlo leaned forward and slid a business card across the table. This is someone who can help, he said. He's already aware of your situation. He's discreet, experienced, and before you ask, yeah, he's family. Another cousin. I couldn't help but laugh a little. It seemed like we had cousins tucked away in every profession under the sun. We spent the next hour going over our options, tossing around ideas until we landed on one that felt right. When we were finished, I called the number on the card. Cousin Carl, the specialist, answered. We agreed to hold off on executing the plan until every last detail was in place. No mistakes. No loose ends. In the meantime, I needed to find out just how deep Phil and Terry were in all this. I had a hunch, but I needed proof. After leaving Carlo's place, I drove home slowly, my mind spinning in 100 directions. When I finally parked and walked up to the house, it was quiet. Too quiet. Inside, the kitchen light was on, but Connie wasn't there. Just a note on the table. Went to see Terry. Right. I crumpled it up and tossed it. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Carlo. My guy, the one keeping tabs on Connie, had already updated me. She was over at Phil and Terry's place, and Terry wasn't even home. My stomach twisted at the confirmation, but I kept calm. The surveillance would continue. 3 hours passed before Connie finally walked through the front door. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong, and headed into the kitchen. How was your day? She asked, casual as ever. I told her I'd talked with Carlo about a family issue, vague enough not to raise red flags, but enough to let her stew in uncertainty. She waited, clearly expecting more. After a long pause, she finally asked, So, what was it about? I kept my expression flat and said it was about a cousin's personal file, something sensitive, possibly involving a cheating spouse. I told her I was just offering advice. I watched her face carefully. A flicker of discomfort passed through her eyes, quickly masked by a forced smile. She tried to act indifferent, but the tension in her shoulders gave her away. I reassured her, gently, that everything would be resolved soon. Then I turned away, ending the conversation. The rest of the weekend dragged on. No matter how much I wanted to reach for her, to pretend like nothing had changed, I couldn't. Every time I looked at her, all I could see were the photos Carlo had shown me, her tangled up with Tony, smiling like she hadn't a care in the world. She was good. Scarily good at pretending. Saturday night came and went without incident. But by Sunday, her body language shifted, she wanted intimacy. I kissed her, soft and slow, but my mind screamed liar. Her hands on me didn't feel the same anymore. They felt foreign. We lay in bed, inches apart, trapped in silence. When she finally drifted off, I slipped out of bed and went downstairs. I sat at my computer, trying to focus on work, when a message from Carlo popped up. It was 1 a.m. Everything we'd discussed earlier, it was lining up. Perfectly. The timing was right. I decided then and there, I'd plan a short overnight trip for Wednesday. That would be the trigger. I shot Carlo a quick reply, confirming I was in. But sleep never came. I just sat there, simmering in quiet rage. The next morning, after a quick shower, I dressed and headed down for breakfast. Connie was already at the table, flashing that warm smile like nothing had changed. She served me coffee and toast, sitting across from me with a delicate, practiced grace. I told her I had to head up to Leeds on Wednesday, an overnight thing. Her eyes flicked up over her cup, locking with mine. Just for one night? She asked, pretending it was just casual curiosity. I nodded. Yeah. I'll be back late Thursday. Her gaze didn't break. Is this about Carlo? That cousin of his? I gave a small shrug. He needs some help. I'm not sure what kind, exactly. She smiled, trying to play it cool, but I could see the gears turning in her head. She was working out her own plan. I could see it plain as day. Don't underestimate Carlo, she said. He's got a real talent for solving problems. I stared at her pale face, realizing she was already trying to calculate her next move. I glanced at my watch. Time to start the workday. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and looked her in the eyes. My dear, take care of yourself while I'm gone, I said. And behave. I had a meeting with a lawyer that morning. We sat down for about an hour, going over all the possible options. After discussing the details, I signed every necessary document. The lawyer already had copies of the contents from the envelope Carlo had given me, and he assured me everything would be ready by Wednesday afternoon. We confirmed the plan, and I left with a sense of purpose. From there, I headed straight to the bank. I transferred all of our joint savings into a new account under my name. On top of that, I wired a sizable amount to Carlo and asked him to hang on to it for me. I didn't touch the main household account, left just enough to cover the bills, but no extra cash for Connie to play with. Then I went to our safe deposit box and emptied it, every last bit of cash and jewelry. I opened a new account at another bank, one that Connie didn't know about, and put everything there. I also decided to cut off her monthly allowance. It wasn't about the money. It was about control. By the end of the month, she'd feel it, and maybe that would be the start of her unraveling. Feeling like I'd finally taken the reins back, I returned to my office and got to work. Sadie, my secretary, was already handling things like clockwork. She was sharp, reliable, honestly, probably better at this job than I was some days. As I paused from signing papers, I noticed her looking at me with concern. I turned my chair and faced her. We'd worked together for almost 5 years. She'd always been professional and trustworthy, but there had always been some tension between her and Connie. I'd chalked it up to the usual discomfort between women who didn't quite click. But now, staring into Sadie's worried eyes, I realized I couldn't keep this all bottled up anymore. She could tell something was wrong. She didn't ask, not at first, but I could feel the question hanging in the air. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. There might be some disruptions this week, I told her. If I can't be here, you know what to do. I trust you. She nodded, quiet but supportive. And then she asked, gently, Is there anything else I can do? Sadie wasn't just efficient, she was wise, composed, and dependable. In a moment of weakness, I confided in her. I told her the truth. That Connie was cheating on me. She gasped, genuinely shocked. Are you sure? Tears hit me before I could even nod. My throat tightened, and for the first time since discovering the betrayal, I let go. I cried. Sadie walked around the desk and hugged me, wrapping me in warmth I hadn't felt in days. No judgment. No awkwardness. Just compassion. You're a good man, she whispered, holding me tight. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. When I'd composed myself, she looked me in the eyes and asked, What are you going to do? I'm divorcing her, I said. My voice shook, but I meant it. This ends now. Even though I hesitated, I assured her I wouldn't drag her, or anyone else, into the mess. Still, Sadie was worried. She urged me to be careful. Just promise me, she said. Don't do anything reckless. I gave her my word. The rest of the day crawled by. Every task felt like lifting a weight. But Sadie stayed beside me, shielding me from office distractions and deflecting calls like a pro. I don't know what her husband's like, but he's damn lucky to have her. At one point, I heard her out front, raising her voice at someone. I smiled for the first time all day. She wasn't just kind, she was fierce. That night at home, Connie and I sat on the couch, watching TV. The phone rang. She picked it up and walked into the hallway to answer. I couldn't make out the words, but I caught the tone, hush, careful. After 5 minutes or so, she returned to the living room. I asked casually, "Who was that?" She waved it off. "Oh, just Terry." She was venting. Apparently, Phil started another stupid argument. I tilted my head. "Are they having real problems?" She hesitated. "Not exactly a crisis. Just a disagreement. I think they'll figure it out." That's when it hit me. Wait, is that what that tension was about? Back at the restaurant? Her eyes darted away from mine for a second, and she fumbled with her words. "It wasn't anything serious. Terry just wanted me to talk to Phil, that's all." She said it like it was no big deal, like she was just a messenger. Still, I wasn't buying it. "And what exactly did she want you to say?" I asked. Connie started to smile. I could see Connie struggling, caught in the mess of her own lies. Her nerves were showing, but she tried to cover it up, placing a calming hand on mine. "It's fine, Sam," she said softly. "I think they're close to working things out." I nodded, pretending to be relieved. "That's good news," I said, playing along. "I'm glad their marriage is getting back on track." Still, something nagged at me, and before I could stop myself, I asked, "Do you think Phil's cheating?" Connie shook her head quickly, maybe a little too quickly. No. Nothing like that." Her answer didn't sit right with me. So I pushed a little further. "What about Terry? You think she might be the one stepping out?" That made her pause. She tilted her head, then said, "Maybe we shouldn't get involved. Let them figure it out on their own." "Exactly what I was thinking," I said with a smile. "Still, if I see Phil, I might ask. Just to check in. Make sure he's okay." As I turned my attention back to the TV, I caught Connie's narrowed eyes watching me. That look said it all, conversation over. But I couldn't help myself. A few minutes later, I circled back. "If no one's cheating, then what was that whole phone call about?" She stiffened. Then, without a word, she got up and left the room, practically storming off. I just sat there and chuckled to myself. I had more than enough evidence now, the photos, the lies, the patterns. But the exact role Phil and Terry played in all this? That was still a bit foggy. The rest of the night passed in silence. We avoided each other, as if pretending nothing happened would somehow make it true. By Tuesday morning, I was up early. I left just as Connie was coming down the stairs, still looking confused. "Got a lot to do before tomorrow," I said quickly, avoiding eye contact, and headed for the garage. As I drove, everything came rushing back. Up until last week, life had been weirdly quiet, normal, even. Then came Tony. It started months ago, when Connie went out for drinks with Terry and a few friends. They were at a small club when Tony walked in, tall, smooth, charming, and offered to buy a round for the group. He had that kind of presence, and Connie noticed. So did Terry. Later that night, Terry pulled Connie aside. She warned her. Said Tony had hit on her before, that he was trouble. She begged Connie not to get involved, said she had a bad feeling about him. Connie laughed it off, told her not to worry. She said she had her phone, she could handle herself. And yeah, Tony was attractive, she didn't deny it, but she insisted she wouldn't go there. Terry didn't believe her. Still, the night ended without incident, at least from Terry's point of view. But Tony had already gotten Connie's number. In the days that followed, he started calling her. At first it was casual, playful. Just innocent conversations, light flirting. But when another bachelorette party rolled around and Connie heard Tony would be there, she didn't hesitate. That night, there was dancing. And Tony wasted no time. The second he got her in his arms, he poured it on thick, compliments, soft touches, smooth words. He was relentless. When Connie left the club with Terry, one of their friends, who had been watching everything, scolded her. Told her to cut it off before it went any further. But Connie just smiled and said, "Nothing's happened yet." Tony, meanwhile, looked smug. Like he knew he'd already won. In the weeks that followed, the phone calls got more frequent. The flirting turned serious. he pursued her. Hard. Eventually, one night, Terry couldn't join the group. That was all Tony needed. During one of their phone calls, he made his move, told Connie they should meet again. Just as friends, he said. Nothing more. Connie didn't resist. In fact, she jumped at the chance. She dressed differently that night. Not like she usually would for a night with Terry. There was intention behind every choice. Her outfit, her perfume, her lipstick. She was excited. Nervous. But mostly excited. She grabbed her purse and left, giddy like a teenager. That night was a turning point. They danced. Flirted. Touched. Tony pulled her close, and then took her to his car. They ended up at the Marriott. She didn't hesitate. They spent the night together, wrapped in each other until almost 1 a.m. When Connie finally realized the time, panic set in. She rushed to get dressed and begged Tony to drive her home. Even the ride back took at least another 30 minutes. That night was a wake-up call for Connie, but not the kind you'd expect. And what followed only made it worse. Over the following weeks, Connie kept seeing Tony. She couldn't pull herself away from the thrill, the connection, whatever it was. Every time I was out of town, she stayed with him at that same hotel. They weren't just hooking up anymore. They were building something twisted. Terry tried to intervene. She saw it coming and did everything she could to stop it before things spiraled. Eventually, she brought it up with her husband, Phil. She hoped he might talk to Tony, his own brother, and put an end to it. She begged Connie to end it. To just talk to Tony, explain, walk away. Phil, meanwhile, was stuck between two loyalties, his brother and his friend. It was a pressure cooker. The longer it went on, the harder it became for him to stay neutral. And the closer it got to blowing up. Connie knew it had to end. She wasn't naive. She understood the risks, the danger. But that only seemed to feed her obsession. There was something seductive about the secrecy, the edge of getting caught. And she couldn't let it go. After that tense night at the restaurant, after all my probing questions and veiled comments, she realized things were slipping out of control. She admitted to herself that Tony didn't truly care about her. She was just another thrill to him, a married woman, a game. And yet, she still couldn't walk away. Until finally, she made a decision, one more night. One last time, and then she'd end it. That was her plan. But she still had to convince Tony. That night, as I sat in my car with the legal documents from the lawyer, I could feel the weight of everything pressing in on me. The folder sat on the seat beside me like a loaded gun. Tense and exhausted, I took a long pull from the bottle of whiskey I kept tucked under the seat, my only comfort in that moment. When I got home, Connie was in the kitchen, looking worn and distracted. She asked how I was feeling. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked, trying to read the fear behind her eyes. It was there, clear as day. She was unraveling. "It's been a long day," I said finally. "I need a shower. Carlo and I have a meeting." The mention of Carlo made her flinch. Her expression changed. Something like horror crept into her face, even though she tried to hide it. After showering, I came downstairs and found her still in the kitchen. "What's for dinner?" I asked casually. She shrugged. "Takeout? I'm not in the mood to cook." "Sure," I said. "Let's do Chinese." I called in the order, and while we waited, we sat in the living room. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. The silence between us felt loaded. Over dinner, she asked about my trip. "What time are you leaving tomorrow?" "About 9, I told her. "Flight's at 11. But the real issue won't be handled until evening. That's when I'll finally meet Cousin Carlo. It'll be good to see family again." She nodded slowly. I noticed the sadness in her eyes. Maybe she knew. Maybe she suspected this was the beginning of the end. The next morning, the smell of fresh coffee drifted upstairs, waking me up. It was a small thing, but one I always appreciated. I came downstairs and found Connie making breakfast. I sat, ate toast, sipped the coffee, but it all felt heavy. My stomach churned from the night before. We sat mostly in silence, stealing glances but looking away before our eyes could meet for too long. It was awkward. Forced. We both just wanted it to be over. Eventually, I stood up and checked my watch. "Time to go," I said. "I've got to pick Carlo up." As I walked past her, Connie smiled weakly. "Safe travels, come back soon." I didn't respond. Outside, I got in the car, took a deep breath, and turned the key. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. This was it. The moment everything came to a head. The reckoning. Not long after I left, Connie picked up her phone. She waited through the dial tone, then whispered, "He's gone. Can we still go through with it tonight?" The voice on the other end reassured her. "Yes. It'll be unforgettable." She told him she had convinced Phil to stay out of it, though he was starting to lose patience with her. She said Phil had mentioned something about me, but she told him to mind his own business. Even so, she was excited. Eager. She told Tony she'd meet him at the same place, same room, and then ended the call. Tony smiled as he hung up. Then he grabbed his gear, a small device he'd used to record everything, and slipped out of his hiding spot. A minute later, Carlo received the message. He stared at his phone, a grim smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I hope Sam knows what he's doing," he muttered. I told Carlo, despite everything, that I still loved Connie. I wasn't pretending anymore. I loved her, and I wanted her to truly understand the weight of what she'd done. Even if that meant watching her suffer the fallout with her lover. Even if it cost us everything. With a bit of time to kill before things went into motion, we decided to grab a bite to eat. As we sat there, I brought up the idea of talking to Phil or Terry, but Carlo shot that down immediately. "Not yet," he said firmly. "If they catch wind that you know, it could cause legal problems. There'll be time to deal with them later. For now, let it be." I nodded, reluctantly agreeing. After we left the bar, Carlo introduced me to his brother Alfredo and Alfredo's daughter, Alicia. Alfredo offered a quick apology for his daughter's impulsiveness, saying, "She's strong-willed, like a lot of the girls these days." I smiled, understanding. "Family's family," I said, shaking his hand warmly. Alfredo grinned and told me to pass on greetings to my folks. It was a good moment, a little breath of normalcy before the chaos ahead. Then, around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed. Connie was calling. I answered calmly. "Hey, everything okay?" She said she just wanted to make sure I'd arrived safely, asked how things were going. I told her everything was fine, that Carlo and I were just grabbing a late lunch before the evening picked up. Trying to keep my tone light, I asked about her plans for the night. "I'm going to see Terry," she said, her voice casual. "Everything's fine." I kept it friendly and neutral. "Sounds good," I replied. "I might give Phil a call later. I think he's heading out with his brother." There was a slight pause. Curious, I added. "What's Phil's brother like?" "I don't think I've ever met him," she answered vaguely. "I've only met him once. He seemed kind of like Phil, just different." I wrapped up the call. "We've got to check into the hotel before the meeting. Tell Terry I said hi. Have a good evening." She said goodbye, and I hung up. Carlo looked at me. He didn't need to ask. He saw the pain in my face and simply nodded. "It's done," he said softly. "Now let's go meet the others." We left Alfredo at the bar and made our way to one of the private rooms in the back. Inside were 4 people Carlo trusted. He introduced them, quiet, professional types, and assured me they were solid. "They've proven themselves," he said. Over and over. Then Carlo's phone rang. After a short exchange, he hung up and told the room, "We move in 5. I glanced at my watch. It was already 8 p.m. Time was flying. The crew left first, loading into a minibus to head toward the hotel. Carlo and I slipped out the back and got into a waiting Mercedes. And that's how I ended up where I am now. We parked on a quiet street, just 200 meters from the hotel. The windows fogged slightly from our breath, the silence thick between us. At exactly 9 o'clock, Carlo's phone lit up with a message. "They're in place," he said. We waited a few more minutes, hearts pounding, until another text came in, "Exit covered." Carlo looked at me. "Let's go." We stepped out of the car and made our way to the hotel entrance, each step heavier than the last. Inside, Carlo led me with certainty to the room, 415. As we walked down the hallway, 4 men in hotel staff uniforms appeared as if out of thin air, silently falling into formation around us. I glanced around. The corridor was clear. "Watch the cameras," Carlo warned under his breath. We ducked into the room. The lights flicked on. And there she was. Connie. In bed with Tony. From where I stood, I could see her clearly. Her back arched slightly, her body tangled with his, oblivious to the ambush that was seconds away. Everything inside me cracked. My hand tightened around the object I carried, rage boiling in my chest. Carlo moved swiftly, placing a firm hand on my arm. He gently took the object away, eyes steady, silently pleading with me to hold myself together. Connie sat up, panic setting in as she realized what was happening. She clutched a blanket to her chest, eyes wide, trembling. Her mouth opened, but all that came out were sobs, broken, frantic, unintelligible. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She shook her head over and over, unable to speak, unable to process. In that moment, love, hatred, grief, and fury all collided inside me. Carlo stood tall beside me, a quiet force. He nodded toward the door. "It's time," he said. We left. As we stepped back into the hallway, leaving Connie behind in a pile of shame and tears, Carlo glanced at me. "You handled that better than I thought," he said quietly. "For a moment there, I wasn't sure you'd hold back." I let out a dry, bitter laugh and told Carlo that what just happened, that was just the warm-up. The real punishment would come later, when Connie had to face Tony again and realize that nothing would ever be the same. I didn't need to lay a finger on him, the guys would handle everything. That was enough. Carlo nodded, understanding. "He won't forget tonight," he said, glancing back toward the hotel. "He'll know you were there. That's what matters." We walked through the quiet, dim streets, heading back to the bar. Carlo mentioned that the rooms were ready whenever we needed them. Inside, Alfredo was waiting, still nursing a drink. The place had emptied out, the low hum of music barely audible. It was nearing 1 a.m. when Carlo's phone buzzed with a final message, "It's done." I opened my mouth to say something, to thank him, but he cut me off. "It's over," he said quietly. "Now you've got to figure things out with her." He was right. No more schemes. No more waiting. Just the hard truth, and whatever came after it. We left her there, in that hotel room, surrounded by the wreckage of her own making. I wondered how she'd get home. What excuse she'd give. Whether she'd even dare to speak to me again. Now that she knew I knew, would she finally admit everything? Or keep lying like she always had? Somehow, I doubted she'd come clean. Carlo's voice cut through my thoughts again. "The rooms are ready when you are," he repeated. But sleep didn't come. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying it all, the look in her eyes when she saw me, the shame, the fear, the betrayal. My heart ached. She was the love of my life. My everything. And now, she was the cause of my undoing. The divorce papers were already signed. A courier was scheduled to deliver the official copy today. Part of me wanted to let it play out. Let her come home to find them. But another part of me, the part still stuck in the pain, wondered if she'd come back at all. Now that the truth was out, Connie would be scared. Maybe she'd run to Terry. That seemed like the safest bet. I considered changing the delivery location, just in case. Nearly 7 hours passed. I must have drifted off at some point because Alicia nudged me awake and said it was lunchtime. "You've got 30 minutes," she added. "Carlos said you've got a flight to catch this afternoon." I dragged myself to the mirror and barely recognized the guy staring back at me, exhausted, hollowed out, changed. Still, I got dressed and sat down for lunch with the others. The table chatter was strangely normal. Comforting, even. We shared food. Laughed a little. It helped. But the time slipped away quickly. Eventually, it was time to go. We packed up and got into the car. As we pulled away, I looked out the window and gave a silent goodbye to the people who had helped me hold it together. Back in our neighborhood, I dropped Carlo off. Joanna was waiting outside and rushed to him like they hadn't seen each other in years. She threw her arms around him, kissing him like a newlywed. Then she turned to me. Without saying a word, she hugged me tight. The kind of hug that says, "I'm sorry you're hurting, but you're not alone." Carlo clapped me on the back. "You'll be all right," he said. "Might not feel like it now, but you will." I nodded, too choked up to speak, and drove the rest of the way home. The house was silent. Too silent. The heat was on, but the place felt cold, empty. No scent of food, no clatter in the kitchen. Just nothing. I walked through the rooms like a ghost. Everything was in its place. But she wasn't. No calls. No messages. I checked my phone again. Still nothing from Connie. Defeated, I dropped into a chair in the living room. My eyes landed on a framed photo of the two of us, smiling like idiots on some forgotten vacation. Rage flared. I grabbed the frame and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall. The phone rang. Still seething, I answered. "Hello?" A hesitant voice responded. "Sam? It's Terry." I said nothing at first. My tone stayed sharp. "What do you want?" She hesitated. "Connie's here. She's a mess. Scared to go home." I bit back my anger. "Put her on." I could hear her whispering to Connie in the background. There was a long pause. Then Terry got back on the line. "She won't talk. She's shaking. Sam, she's not okay." I exhaled slowly. "Tell her I'm coming to pick her up." In the background, I heard Connie scream, not a word, just a raw, painful sound. Terry stammered, unsure of what to do. "I figured," I said quietly. "I'll be there soon." Terry apologized, her voice low and remorseful, admitting she had tried, and failed, to stop everything from happening. She mentioned speaking with Phil, but it hadn't changed anything. I told her how sad the whole thing made me, how deeply it had affected not just my marriage, but also a friendship I used to value. I didn't want to dwell on it any longer, and she seemed to understand. She whispered, "I'm sorry. One more time." I took a deep breath, trying to find some sliver of peace in the middle of the chaos. "Thanks, Terry," I said. "But we both know things won't ever go back to the way they were." With that, I ended the conversation and told her I wouldn't be coming to pick Connie up. Instead, I asked her to pass along a message. Connie's things would be packed up and ready for her to collect. If she waited too long, I'd toss them. She no longer lived here, that chapter was closed. I added that some papers would be sent to the house, and advised extreme caution moving forward. No more texts. No more calls. I made sure Terry understood every word, stating firmly that the last time I heard from Connie was around 7:30 p.m. the night before. "She's nervous," Terry said softly. When she got to our place, she looked like a ghost. I didn't respond. Carlo, listening nearby, gave me a grim smile, clearly amused by the drama. But for me, the next day was already calling. I had a long list in my head: work, the locksmith, financial cleanup, logistics. The trust that once lived between Connie and me? Gone. And now that the divorce papers had been served, there was no way I could stay in this marriage, emotionally or legally. Part of me expected Connie to reach out that day. Maybe to explain. Maybe to cry. But by the time the knock came, it was already 9 a.m. I opened the door and saw Terry and Phil standing there. Their faces were heavy with regret. Without a word, I stepped aside and let them in. We moved into the living room. They sat on the couch, and I took a seat across from them, bracing for whatever came next. "So," I said, keeping my voice steady, What did you two want to talk about? Phil went first. I'm sorry, he said. I should have told you about Connie, about what she was doing. Terry nodded, her expression pained. I tried to talk to her. I really did. I just couldn't reach her. Their apologies were tough to hear, not because they were insincere, but because they were real. They stung. I turned to Terry. You said Connie doesn't understand anything. What does that mean? Terry hesitated. When you were away on Wednesday, she called me. Said Tony left her at the hotel? Just left her there. I sat up straighter. What? Phil jumped in. We've tried calling Tony. He's not answering. Connie doesn't have much to say either. All she told Terry was that she felt trapped. Like she couldn't leave. Then he just disappeared. A chill ran through me. Trapped? Are you saying something happened between them? I stared at Phil, expecting something, anything more. Come on, man. She had to have said more than that. Did he hurt her? They exchanged an uneasy glance. Clearly, my anger was rising again. I shook my head. What the hell happened? Terry's face fell. She's not okay. After she got the divorce papers, she just lost it. Completely. She was shaking, crying, confused, like she couldn't make sense of anything. My anger surged again, but this time it was tangled with fear. I hated her for what she did, but now I was terrified that maybe, just maybe, something worse had happened in that hotel room. She did this to herself, I said coldly. If she's in pain now, it's the price she pays. They didn't know how to respond. The room went quiet. Then Terry, her voice trembling, said, Sam, don't do this. Divorce is a big decision. Talk to her first. Please. You owe yourselves that. I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't just meddling. She was genuinely worried, for Connie, and maybe even for me. And suddenly my anger started to fade. Not completely, but enough to let the other emotions come in. Regret. Fear. Exhaustion. I nodded slowly. I like you, Terry. I really do, I said honestly. Even after everything. Her words, her concern, they hit home. She was right. I couldn't just walk away without hearing Connie out. Not now. Not like this. I closed my eyes, took a long breath, and prepared myself. The reckoning wasn't over yet. I took a deep breath and said, All right, Terry. I'll talk to her. But only after her stuff is out of the house. Just me and her, that's it. I'll call Connie myself and let her know when and where. How does that sound? Terry's eyes welled up with tears, and she hugged me tight. I glanced at Phil. His expression was a mix of guilt and something like regret. I placed a hand gently on Terry's shoulder and said, Thank you for understanding. Please tell her to wait for my call. And don't worry, I won't leave her hanging. Phil muttered, I'm sorry, Sam. My brother deserved a good beating from you. I wouldn't have blamed you. From the window, I watched them walk off quickly, probably heading back to Connie. Left alone, I thought about what Terry said. As much as it hurt, she was right. This conversation with Connie couldn't be pushed back any longer. But before I did anything, I called my longtime friend and confidant, Sadie. We talked for a solid half-hour. She told me about her life, and for a few moments, I got to escape mine. She was remarkable, smart, warm, and steady. When we eventually touched on the topic of Connie, her tone changed. She sounded like a worried mom, not just a friend. It reminded me of those firm but loving talks my mom used to give. In the end, Sadie insisted I come over for dinner with her and her husband that evening. I didn't really want to, but I said yes. The rest of the day was filled with change. I called the locksmith and had every lock replaced. I moved furniture, packed up Connie's clothes, threw away anything that didn't matter, and even took down our photos. Some I boxed up. Some I just couldn't bear to look at. Each action chipped away at what our life used to be. By sunset, I found myself staring out the window again, wondering how this would all end. I knew I needed to be strong for the conversation ahead. But when the time came, I pushed the call off again. I was just too tired. Another night passed, restless and heavy. Then, right before 7:30 the next morning, the phone rang. It was Phil. He told me that Tony had been in the hospital for a few days, injured but stable. I didn't flinch. My voice was ice. Don't expect any sympathy from me, Phil. He's lucky we never crossed paths. I've got no respect for him. None. Phil didn't argue. He understood. He even apologized for not being a better friend, for letting things go so far without telling me. It's not your fault, I said. But thanks for letting me know. He passed along a message of love from Terry, and we hung up. I set the phone down and turned my attention to the window. The garden looked calm, peaceful. A few birds landed at the feeder, pecking at the seeds I'd put out. Watching them always settled my nerves. In that stillness, I picked up the phone again and called Carlo. Tony's in the hospital, I said flatly. Carlo's reply was short and dry, but full of finality. Good. It's done right. I nodded to myself, set the phone aside, and took a slow sip of coffee. The smell grounded me. The taste steadied my nerves. Then the phone rang again. I let the machine pick it up. I didn't want to talk. Not yet. But when Connie's voice came through the speaker, trembling, broken, I froze. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I need to explain. I need to come home. Please, Sam. I need you. I'm so sorry. Her words crumbled under the weight of her crying, and every sentence was a punch to the chest. My hands clenched into fists, but my heart cracked open all the same. The message ended, leaving only silence. And I sat there, still, breathless, knowing that nothing about this would be simple. My breathing was heavy, and my thoughts were all over the place, spinning in circles that led nowhere. I knew I had to face this today, to deal with it once and for all, but I needed her to wait. She had to understand that whatever decision I made wasn't just a gut reaction to that voicemail. It had to be something deliberate. Final. For the next few hours, I wandered around the house aimlessly, lost in a haze of thought. Every room that used to feel familiar now felt hollow. Without Connie's things, all I saw were empty shelves and blank walls, physical gaps that mirrored the emotional one left behind. I called Sadie and asked if she could help round up a few folks with a van. Within the hour, we had packed all of Connie's things, boxes, bags, everything, and loaded them up. I stood on the porch and watched the van pull away. That was it. Her things were on their way back to her. The final step in a journey that only had one direction now, away from each other. Soon after, my phone buzzed. It was a message confirming delivery. Terry called not long after to say everything had arrived. I gave her a quick thank you and didn't say much else. She mentioned they'd put most of the stuff in a storage unit but kept a few personal items with her, as I had marked. Then she asked, "Are you going to talk to Connie?" I paused, then told her to have Connie call me. I'd wait. When Connie did call, I didn't let her get far. "Don't," I said, cutting off her apology. "Just leave it alone, Connie. You're finally getting answers to questions you never even thought to ask. Too busy chasing whatever it was." She kept pleading, trying to say more, but I stayed firm. "There's nothing left for us to talk about," I told her. "This is where our road ends. What could you possibly say that would help me deal with this?" Her voice broke as she begged to come home, to talk face to face. Exhausted, I finally said, "Fine. I'll listen. But I'm not promising anything." We ended the call, and I just sat there, the sound of her voice still echoing in my mind. There was pain in her tone, but I wondered if she could hear the pain in mine. Leaning back in my chair, I thought about everything. About our marriage. About the life I thought we had. And for the first time, I truly questioned how much of it had been real. How much of what I thought I knew about Connie had just been a projection of who I wanted her to be. Had she done this before? Had there been other nights, other lies? The thought chilled me, but I shoved it aside. I had to stay composed. I had to get through this final meeting with a clear head. Then the doorbell rang. It was her. Opening the door, time seemed to pause. We hadn't seen each other since that gut-wrenching night at the hotel. She stepped into the living room, her eyes scanning the space. A thin sigh escaped her lips, followed by a choked sob. She noticed the emptiness, the missing photos, the stripped-down walls, the souvenirs of a life that no longer existed. Standing in front of me, she covered her mouth with her hand. Her eyes welled with tears. I stayed cold. My voice was low, bitter. It's all gone, Connie. Look around. That's what's left. She tried to speak, said she didn't understand. I never wanted this, I said. But actions have consequences. She kept pleading. Her voice trembled as she said she was sorry, that she never meant for it to get that far. I nodded. You had an affair. You built a connection with another man. And now you're here wondering why everything's changed? She dropped onto the couch like the weight of it all finally hit her. There was a long silence before she looked up at me. I couldn't stop, she said quietly. I don't know why. It felt like an addiction. And for a second I faltered. I asked myself, deep down, if I had it in me to forgive. Then I told her. I told her I'd spoken with Terry and Phil, that I had a clearer picture now, even though I still didn't fully understand why any of it had happened. That part still gnawed at me. Connie shifted in her seat, eyes dropping to the floor. I don't know, she murmured. I can't explain it. He was new. Exciting. And I got caught up. I couldn't hide the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. You didn't just get caught up, Connie. You slept with him. Repeatedly. For weeks. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I meant every one of them. She nodded slowly, guilt weighing down her posture. I messed up. I know I did. But I want to fix it. I want us to move past this, somehow. I ignored the plea and shifted gears. Where is he? I asked, my voice flat. Don't call him my lover, she said quickly, defensive. Yes, I went on dates with him, but I never stopped loving you. I swear I didn't. Her voice cracked, and the tears started again. She was unraveling, but all I could think about was how many times she'd smiled in my face while texting him behind my back. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. You lied. Over and over. Why should I believe a single word now? She sobbed harder, shaking her head. I get it. I get why you hate me. But I haven't heard from him. I don't want to. I hate him. He ruined my life. She glanced around the room, her eyes settling on the empty space where our wedding photo used to hang. Walking slowly toward it, she reached out as if to touch a memory that no longer existed. Then she crumbled onto the couch, drained, hollow. For a long moment, we sat in silence, just two broken people on opposite ends of a collapsed bridge. Finally, she looked up at me, desperation flickering behind the tears. Is there really no chance? Not even a little? I took a deep breath. My chest felt like it was caving in, but I held her gaze. You didn't just cheat, Connie. You tore apart what we built. You disrespected everything we shared. Everything our friends stood by us for. This marriage? It's over. The words felt like final nails driven into a coffin. Sign the divorce papers, I added, my voice barely above a whisper. And leave. Leave this house, leave this city. I need peace. I need distance. She sat there for a beat longer, her face frozen in shock and sorrow. Then, slowly, she stood up. I followed her to the door. She stepped outside, walked to her car, and opened the door. Before getting in, she turned to me one last time. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't answer. I just closed the door. And with that, she was gone. Not just from my house, but from my life. 2 days later, Carlo called. He told me Connie had left the country. Said his guys had seen her off. She wouldn't be finding peace in this city. Not anymore. Not after what she'd done.